Thank you for coming here today. I'm really excited to talk to the group that's here now, and I want to thank Conricyt for organizing this, as well as my colleague Sergio Zapita de Alba, who's Library Marketing Manager for Latin America, and helped to put this together. So my name is Sara Doskow. I'm an editor for political science and sociology at Cambridge University Press. I've been at CUP for about 5 years, and before that I was at Palgrave Macmillan, also working on political science. So a lot of what I'll say will be from the perspective of CUP, but I think it applies more broadly, including to commercial presses that publish academic work. I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes about writing your book and thinking about the transition from dissertation to book, as I imagine that's what a lot of you are doing, and about approaching the publisher, but I'll try to leave most of our time together for question and answer. So if you have a question, probably a lot of other people share that, so please do ask. So my colleague Sergio had suggested I put together a checklist of things to think about before you approach the publisher. So I think if you registered for this, you would have gotten that by email, and those documents are also in the chat. So I'll broadly follow some of the points that are there. But I wanted to start off by just saying two things of context of sort of who I am and what I'm looking for when I look for projects. So the first thing I'll say is that in any given week, I'm usually receiving about 15 proposals, and usually I can only take about one of those on average forward for review. So it's a pretty competitive process, and I often have to decline books that have merit and are very sound research. But the second thing I'll say is that I want to emphasize that big ideas really do stand out. So I don't know what I'm going to publish in advance. A lot of the books that I take forward are by people I don't know, whose advisors I don't know, but where they sent me an introduction to the book, where it was just immediately clear that this was a rich book that had something to say. So I'm also not a political scientist. I don't really have a stake in what kinds of methods you use, or in particular debates in the discipline. And I guess I'm sort of looking at things at a level that's sort of more general than a specialist. So I'm looking to see how something resonates broadly, and I think, the best books are usually books that change the way people think, and where sort of even someone, even your grandmother, she probably wouldn't be able to read the book cover to cover and understand exactly what you're doing, but she would understand sort of why the research question matters in the real world. So let me turn now to preparing to approach the publisher and preparing the book. When you start writing your book, I think the first thing you want to do is think about, why you want to write something as a book rather than as a series of articles, and how that will be distinct from your dissertation. So dissertations usually pursue careful empirical research and literature review, and you're looking to show your committee that you have mastered the field and are ready to be admitted. By the time you write a book, people assume that you've mastered the literature and do solid work, but they don't have to read the dissertation. So, the book entails thinking about your broader contribution, and it's written for a wider audience. So, usually it's rare that someone would be ready to submit a book proposal within a year of defending the dissertation. Usually it takes some more time and perspective, and often some additional research. But my recommendation would be to step back and to think about, who is interested in reading this work. What are some of the threads that were interesting to you when you were doing the dissertation that you didn't have time to pursue empirically, but that you'd like to pursue now? Who do you want to engage with? What are the literatures that your book contributes to? Ideally, that'll be multiple literatures. I'd also encourage folks to expose the dissertation as widely as possible. So, write to other scholars anywhere in the world who are doing work that you want to engage with and that you think is relevant to your own. Often those scholars will pull out something in the dissertation that's, or an article that you wrote that, that maybe wasn't something that you played up or really emphasized, but that is compelling. So I think that can only be to your benefit. In comparison to an article, I think it's similar to the, I think articles or books are empirical like articles, but usually there's a greater theoretical scope and ambition. So the ideas sort of need to be rich enough to sustain a 300-page argument with multiple chapters. And, those chapters should also be integrated. You don't want it to feel like 5 articles, addressing related themes with different kinds of data sources and different kinds of concepts. There needs to be a sense, reading the book, that each chapter is building, and that the end contribution is something cumulative from all the chapters. I hinted at this, but I would recommend really outlining all the different contributions of your book. When I read a proposal, I love it when someone lists 5 different contributions, right? Like, I'm always looking to see a certain density in ideas, and to see that a book will be read, within multiple subfield communities. So that's always exciting. So I would encourage that. I think, once you're pretty far along in developing the book, it's time to think about what publisher you should approach. And there I think about what books yours speaks to most directly, and who published those. So in political science, CUP publishes across all subfields. So, any book could potentially be relevant to us. In sociology, I focus on a much smaller set of subfields. So I'm usually looking at political sociology, economic sociology, and social inequality. And, something on the sociology of sports, might be a great book, but would probably be, I wouldn't be the right publisher for it, because our sociology list is smaller. So you want to think about that. I think you also want to think about, many presses will have book series that publish about 3 to 4 books a year. Most of the books that we publish are not published in series, but I think it's always useful, if there's a really organic connection with the series, it can be very useful to approach the academic series editors in advance. And something like Cambridge, something like the comparative politics series is pretty broad, so a lot of projects will be relevant for that. But if you're something like, we have a religion and social theory and politics series, something like that, I would say, where there's it's sort of a more specific subfield community. That would sort of be the place, I think, where it would be the most helpful to talk to series editors if you think there's a good fit. But, again, a series is not a prerequisite at any point. Before you approach the publisher, I think it's a good exercise to put together a proposal of about 8 pages, and also a 1-paragraph abstract. Again, I'm getting about 15 proposals a week, so, I'm not giving all of them as much time as I would, like to in an ideal world. So you want to really make sure you get to the point right away. In the 1-paragraph abstract, it should tell a story about this research and why the research question matters, what your argument is, and sort of what's the so what of the argument, what are the implications, and so why will sort of people want to read this beyond the empirical material, and how does it matter to people's lives. The proposal, I would say, you want to always include that 1-paragraph abstract, and then to talk about the contributions, to talk about what your work builds on. One thing I'd really encourage people to do as they think about a first book is to really take ownership, and don't be shy about saying what you're doing and how unique it is. Really take ownership of what you're doing. But you also want to situate your book within the existing literature that you're building on and furthering, both just because that's good manners and good ethics, but, also it shows the publisher that there's an audience for the book, and sort of where the book fits in the field. I also recommend including a chapter outline with abstracts that show how the different chapters build on each other, because that helps me get a sense very quickly for sort of the richness of a book. I often get questions about when to approach a publisher, and I think, there's no exact right answer. Some publishers will say, just stop by the booth, you don't have to email me in advance. Some publishers might want you to email. I don't think you're really going to go that wrong with anything there, but you do, and you shouldn't be shy to approach publishers, but you do want to approach the publisher at the stage where you're prepared to give the best possible presentation of your work. So, that's usually when you're pretty far along after the dissertation. But I do encourage everyone to reach out to publishers, and it's certainly something that North American scholars aren't shy about. So don't be scared, but just sort of go into it prepared. Yeah, and then, I'll just say a few words quickly about the review process, and then I'll open it up to the question and answer, and I can talk about any other aspects. But I wanted to end just on a positive note of saying I think the review process with book publishing is often a lot more friendly than the process for article publishing. I think, it's a bigger task for a reviewer to review a book. So usually they're invested in it to begin with, and they give you the benefit of the doubt, I think, often in a way they might not with articles, and suggestions are usually focused on the big picture. And I'll always share, if the reviews are favorable, and under any circumstances, I'll share the reviews with the author, and I'll usually want an author response. And author response, is a place where you say how you'll address the reader's concerns. You always want to say how, not just that you will, but sort of explain your strategy for addressing concerns. But also, if you think a reviewer sort of misread something, or you don't like the direction a particular reviewer is pointing you in, the response to the review is a place to flag that to the publisher, and you want to sort of explain your reasoning. But I don't think it's the same as sort of the reviewer is God, and you have to do every single thing to appease this reviewer. So we want you to recognize the book and feel that it's your own at the end. So I'll leave it there and open it up for questions. So if you can raise your hand on Zoom, Sergio will will unmute you, and we'll also take questions through the chat. Okay, so Sergio will unmute people, but I'm seeing one question in the chat. How do you raise your hands on Zoom? Sergio, can you speak to that?
Yes, so there's a button on the lower right hand of your screen. It says more or más opciones, and you should click on that button, and then it will give you the option to raise your hand, to chat, or to hide your videos, basically. So press the más button or more if you have the version in English, and just raise your hand. I think we have a question now, a raised hand from Eugenia Ortega. Eugenia, be sure, feel free to ask your question now. I think I have unmuted you.
Thank you very much. I feel like a little bit curious about the process of all of this review for librarianship, items, or if I only want to publish one chapter, not exactly a book, is it possible?
Sorry, the sound was not that good. If you only want to publish one chapter, did you say?
Yes. If I want to publish with Cambridge only one chapter or entire book, not only a specific item, I mean not a specific subject of librarianship as a part of the project, is that possible?
Yeah, so we will, I would say we publish three kinds of works. We publish traditional books where it's a full book. We also have a series called Cambridge Elements, where we publish works at length between book and article, so about 20 to 30,000 words. Those are always accepted in specific series. So there are particular areas where we will do those. And then we publish edited volumes, which will have an individual chapter. But those are, usually those are always curated by an outside editor. So there wouldn't really be a context where CP would be able to consider a chapter that's submitted without being submitted in the context of a volume. Did I understand that question correctly?
Sure. The thing is, in some of our institutions, the projects or the final projects are going to be published in the future, like chapters, not exactly a book, but it seems easily for the institution and other people involved in the project to publish these chapters as a part of an entire project that finally could be a book, but not exactly is that the final report. So I don't know if Cambridge has this kind of option to publish in the future chapters or part of report projects, not as a case of study, like I know a literature review or other kind of projects, not exactly a case of study. But I have not seen in these books of Cambridge the category of an exactly subject or when, I don't know, biology or history, like a chapter. It's always a product, a final product like a book. That's why I feel a little curious.
Okay, so you're asking about permission to publish something that appears in a Cambridge book elsewhere, whether the Cambridge book publishes first or the article, or is that right?
Yes, but in a Mexican context, I don't know, I'm sorry if my sound is a little bit crazy because the internet is not very good at all. But in resume, I want to say that some institutions only want to publish chapters as a result of a final report in a book, but only have the permission to publish a chapter, not all the book. And that's why I'm curious about if Cambridge has that possibility to publish only the chapter.
Yeah, we are fine with you posting up to 1 to 2 chapters from the book on an institutional repository, and even in article form too. Usually that wouldn't be the chapter verbatim, but it would probably make similar arguments and draw on the same evidence. If you publish something as an article in a journal and you sign a form granting the journal permission, you want to check their author reuse policy. You might have to explicitly ask them for permission to reuse that material in a book. But most articles will have a policy where authors can expand the article into a full-length book, provided that it's an authored book rather than an edited book. And I'll also say we don't really care if the dissertation is available in your institution's repository. That's fine, because the book should be different from the dissertation, so it wouldn't really threaten the market. Did that answer?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah, I think we have a question through the chat.
Okay.
It's from Catherine Reyes. How reviewers are chosen? How are reviewers chosen, and what the timeline is from once you submit your manuscript to acceptance?
Yeah, so reviewers are chosen. I always welcome author suggestions on who would be an appropriate reader. I don't promise that I will go to only those reviewers, but often I'm working across a ton of different fields within political science. So if you're writing on a party, I might not know who's written the foundational works on that particular party in that country. So I always welcome author suggestions. I always also, if an author believes that someone would read their manuscript unfairly, I always give authors space to flag anyone, and that shouldn't be 20 people, but that can be 1 to 2 people, and I won't ask too many questions about that. And that's just my acknowledgement that academia can be strange. I'm also, picking reviewers based on who I know, often people who are my authors, often people who I've seen write really insightful reviews before. Often I'm trying to pick reviewers so that they'll speak to different literatures that the book contributes to. So, someone might be a specialist on the country, someone else might be, a specialist on a totally different region, but will work on something that's theoretical, some of the similar theoretical concerns. The review process itself, it usually takes, I would say, 2 to 4 months, and never hesitate to ask your editor to confirm what the timeline is or confirm when the book is with readers. And if you're facing any deadlines, if you're up for tenure review, let the editor know. I mean, we don't like to be put in a position where we have to get reviews for your tenure file in 1 month, but we are on the same team. We do, I think normally editors are empathic people, so we will want to help, and sometimes that gives us leverage with reviewers. If a reviewer is really late, we can say, look, this matters. There's a pressing deadline.
Okay, I think there's another question from Raúl Aldaz. It says, it is relatively common that authors produce a paper that is expanded later on the form of a book. What are the pros, cons, and things to think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's, you have a research agenda, and you ideally want to be publishing multiple pieces from that research agenda, and that can increase the visibility of your work. It'll help you get feedback on that work. When I look at a book, it doesn't bother me if 1 to 2 chapters have an article-like version, but I might be a bit skeptical if sort of more than 20% of the book has appeared in article form. I might wonder if the book is really more just a collection of articles than a book. For me, the concern is making sure that the book as a whole makes a contribution above and beyond. It makes a theoretical contribution above and beyond, what's been published in articles, so that someone would really, need to read the book to fully learn what contribution you're making.
Okay, I think we have another question via the raising hand. So Ricardo Villanueva, I have unmuted you, so you can ask your question.
Hi, Sarah. I'm Ricardo. I have some questions regarding the cost of publishing a book. So how much approximately is the cost, I don't know, for a book of 100,000 words? And then if it makes a difference, if I have financial support for the book, like 50% of the book, and I approach to you, would my chances to get published would they be raised, or would it be the same? Can I also personally put some money to finance the book so that I can increase my chances to get published?
Okay, so you shouldn't have to pay anything to publish your book with Cambridge or any US based or UK based press. So we definitely do not ask for money. I mean, there might be costs that enter at 2 points in the process. So one would be if English is not your native language, you might want to work on your own with a language editor prior to submitting. And the book will be copy edited by CUP after it's accepted, but working with the language editor would be to address anything that would sort of go beyond a standard copy edit that's looking for occasional errors. And sometimes just helps the reviewers focus better as they evaluate the manuscript. So that might be one cost that you pay, whoever sort of separate from the formal publication process, but to just give yourself the best shot at the publication process. And then the other thing where money might come in is we ask authors to create their own index. So I always recommend that the authors do that themselves, because you'll know the concepts best and you will do the most substantive index. But sometimes indexes are labor intensive to do, and sometimes an author might want to hire a freelancer to do it. And then I guess the third scenario where money might enter is open access. So sometimes if there's funding of about $14,000, we might make a book totally free digitally. So it wouldn't be behind any sort of paywall. And the $14,000 is subsidizing the money that we lose because we're not selling the book. But the review process is completely distinct from the open access funding. So we don't want that funding to change the incentives for us to publish the work. So it would really need to be a work that we publish under any circumstances, and then the funding is there just to make the book free rather than something that we charge for.
Thank you. Do you publish online material or just printed?
We do all of our books. We release simultaneously in print and in digital.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Hi. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you, Alan. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to know how often do you accept books that aren't finished? That, I don't know, maybe there's a chapter that needs some more work, and how often do you accept a manuscript the author tells you that it needs more working on it?
Yeah. So I mean, nothing that you submit to Cambridge for review will be published in the final version as that. So we do expect books to evolve through the review process, but usually you do want the book to be in a pretty polished state by the time that you approach the publisher, because that just gives you, again, it's a very competitive process. So you want to give yourself the best possible chance at receiving reviews that say this is a really important polished book. I have no question that that it'll be successful. I have these suggestions for the author, but fundamentally this looks great. So we do sometimes offer what we call advanced contracts, where we might offer a conditional contract on the basis of reviews of a proposal or a proposal in sample chapters. But that's something that's the exception more than the norm, and so that's something that we'll do when an author has an established track record with the press. They've published books before, and there's a large market for the book. But for a first book or a dissertation-based book, we do really need the full manuscript. Sometimes people ask me if they can submit without the conclusion, and I don't know. I mean, if they're about to go on maternity leave, I might have some sympathy for that and say, okay, but I do think conclusions are important, and you want the reviewer to be able to comment on that. So I do, you should never feel like when submitting the manuscript, you won't get a chance to work on it again, because you certainly will. So, I think perfectionists should submit earlier than they think, and non-perfectionists should probably take more time than they think. But, you want to give yourself the best chance in the review process, and not only the best chance of, the reviewers recommending publication, but also the reviewers being really enthusiastic and telling me as the publisher that there will be a market and that we should really get behind the book and put resources behind promoting it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is from Paula Alexandra Ocañas, and it is it considered appropriate to pursue the publishing of a book that is just for a specific school or college or subject or class? Is that something we usually do?
I mean, so we'll publish some textbooks that are for teaching purposes, more than research purposes, but might have sort of, I think textbooks can be very, even if they're not research-based, they can be exciting and develop new frameworks and often have a much broader audience than a research book. It's a competitive, so I wouldn't say no, but, I guess the question is sort of why it would only be for that class, how big of a class that is. I think, some books might speak to more different literatures than others, and that's fine. But there needs to be a large enough audience for the book to be financially viable for the press, and for the press to feel like as it declines books that, that are sound, good books. We need to know why this book is likely to really be influential and leave a mark on the field. So usually you want the book to make a theoretical contribution beyond the empirical focus. Does that answer the question?
I think so. So, Alexander, if it doesn't, or if you have a follow-up question, be sure to write on the chat, and we'll take it as it goes. There's a question by Emily Riley. What is your policy for having a Cambridge book translated into Spanish and published with another publisher?
That's pretty common. So we often the contract it'll assign all language rights to CUP, and then we have a foreign rights division, that would negotiate, that would sort of represent some books. Translations, they're expensive for the other publisher to fund, and the other publisher would have to buy rights. So, usually the publisher needs to know that there's a market to want to pay for rights, but we do have a very active foreign rights division that will sell, Spanish language rights, for instance, to Spanish language publishers. You can also, it depends on the exact press and the editor and their policy, but often you can also negotiate at the contract stage that you want to retain Spanish language rights for the book, and then you would, sort of find the other publisher yourself, and you'd be on your own in that regard, but the other publisher wouldn't have to pay for rights. But yeah, that's always, if that's a real priority for you, you definitely want to, talk about the editor early, and, ask the editor if it's a book that the Foreign Rights Department would be actively working to promote, because that might shape whether or not you want to retain rights or sort of let the publisher negotiate rights.
Okay, so the next question, it came first through the chat and then through a raised hand. So I think I'm going to unmute Simon. Go ahead, Simon, and you're unmuted now.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for the talk. I wanted to ask you a bit about whether you could expand on what happens after you submit a full draft of your book. What are the stages, and also you mentioned a little bit about the copy editing process, but like, how does that work? What's the level of detail that I should expect?
Yeah.
This?
Those are great questions. So, when you submit the manuscript and the proposal, usually the publisher will sort of do their internal look in, about 1 to 3 weeks and say, I want to take this forward for review or not. Then the review process is usually 2 to 4 months. We get your response to the review. If the reviews are positive, I will bring the book forward, to my colleagues in marketing and sales and to our syndicate board, and you'll get a contract. Then you can take as long as you need to revise the book, and we just ask you to give us a realistic deadline so we can plan for what season it will be published in. Once you're ready to submit, you'll send it to me. I may or may not send it back to one of the original reviewers. That usually depends on how substantive, and how fundamental to the success of the book the recommendations from the reviews are. So probably most books I will not build in that step. I'll just sort of trust the author based on the response plan they submitted to me. But, you know, if there are big outstanding questions, I might want to go back to an original reviewer. And I would be very transparent with the author at the beginning about, you know, whether I'd be doing that. And if I did that, which reviewer I'd go back to. You know, if reviewers pointed you in different directions, we would talk about which reviewer I'd go back to. You know, then the actual production process, which is, you know, once you've done the final, you know, you are ready and it is the final draft, and you send it to us to be copy edited, to be typesetted. You know, that can be, you know, I would say a lot is changing because just global supply chain networks are pretty under a lot of stress right now, but I mean, that can sort of be anywhere, I would say, from 8 to 10 months. The copy editing process, it's a professional copy edit, but it's a very light touch. You know, so the market in academic publishing has changed a lot recently. So editors and presses are under a lot of pressure to reduce costs. You know, and so I can't say in good faith that it will be, you know, a really good detailed copy. You know, it will. You know, they'll sort of be looking for any grammatical errors. They'll be querying something that doesn't make sense. You know, but I don't think the copy editing process at any academic press is quite as, you know, thorough as it was 10 years ago. So that's that's the truth. I wish.
Great. Thanks very much.
Okay, so the next question is from Julia Guadalupe Garcia, and I'm going to unmute the microphone in a moment. I think we should be almost there.
Yeah. Hi, Sara. I have a question. How do Cambridge looks for people who are interested in publishing a book? I mean, you make a call for paper. A call for book like the call for papers of journals, or for a specific season for publishing, or for example, the spring, just summer. And or you just look for a specialist in a specific area?
For the cover of the book?
Yeah.
Yeah. So every book will have its own cover. So we love author suggestion. You know, if your book covers a very specific movement or a specific party, usually it's good to have a photographic image. You know, our design, we work with the site gettyimages.com, which is a stock photo website. So sometimes we can find you know, photographs or more abstract images that are appropriate from there. You know, sometimes some books the topic lends themselves better to finding an image easily than others. If the author is interested in a very specific photo that's not on Getty or on maybe commissioning artwork, usually the author would sort of work on that independently and see if he could reimburse the author for something like $200 toward the cost of commissioning that artwork. So our designers will, you know, produce something for you and it will be different from other covers. But, you know, it's really great to have authors who care a lot about covers and come to you with a lot of ideas. So that's a great thing to keep in your mind. You know, if you're doing field work, it's great to be thinking ahead and to go in with your camera.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So the next question is from Miriam Jacqueline Gomez. How should someone proceed to see if a PhD dissertation or thesis can be published?
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to think about those questions, you know, that I mentioned earlier about who's the audience, who are you engaging with, why will people want to read this, you know, will it change the way they think about a topic? You know, there are no guarantees, and I'm always, you know, sometimes people will sort of come to me with 3 ideas and sort of say, like, what should I do? You know, and I'm very, very uncomfortable always answering that question because I can't make any guarantees about what the review process will look like or what the final product will be. So, you know, it kind of hinges on, you know, you kind of at some point, I think, need to just have faith in the work, and, you know, you want to make the decision yourself. And, you know, maybe you can talk to your advisors and other mentors in the field and get their thoughts. You know, does this make sense as a book? Does it make more sense as articles? You know, but, you know, some of it's a leap of faith and there's no way to know exactly, but, you know, and there are different publishers too. So, I mean, if you know, I'm saying that I get 15 projects a week and I only take 1 forward, you know, but probably 10 of those will be, you know, published by some publisher. You know, it's hard to answer in the abstract and there are no guarantees, but I think, you know, it takes a really long time to write a book. It's a big task. So you need to sort of believe in it. But I would say to follow your own gut there. So I don't know if that's the most helpful answer.
I think it was.
Okay, good.
And if we don't answer the question, or if you have follow-up, please be sure to write in the chat as well. So the next question is from Armando Naya. And can you publish books that have links to data on the internet? Something like big data or something of the sort?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and for very, very quantitative work, we often encourage you to have online appendices. So I think, you know, anything that's really essential to trusting the validity of the empirics, you know, should probably be in the book, often in an appendix. But again, I think, you know, one difference from book to article, you know, is it's less focused on, it's more focused on the bigger story. So you don't want too much of the empirics weighting, you know, you don't want too much methodological discussion in the chapters, because it just won't be sort of interesting to someone to read. Like, you probably wouldn't want to read it if you were reading someone else's book. So definitely, you know, we can host material online and include links, and that's a good move often. You know, and then you might have data that you keep building on and updating. I think, you know, people do very innovative stuff with how they store data online.
Okay, so the next question is from Ross Mitiga. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the last name correctly, but I'm going to unmute the microphone so you can ask them.
Okay, thanks. You were close enough on the name. Thank you, Sarah, for taking the time for doing this, to do this. But I just had one question, and maybe a fairly esoteric one. I'm curious what Cambridge does to mitigate the environmental impact of publishing books. I looked online, just out of curiosity. I should say I work in environmental theory, so this is kind of a professional interest of mine too. But I see on your website there's not much in terms of specifics, even though of course the book industry is pretty carbon intensive. So I'm just curious to hear like what you guys do in that area, especially like relative to your competitors, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't know that I can give you the most informed answer on that, because it's not something that I've followed very closely at the press, but there is a big push to look at our environmental footprint. So that is one of sort of the big initiatives that we hear a lot about from upper management. So think like, you know, we were asked to look at our conference travel and see how essential some of it was, you know, if there were journeys that we could make by train rather than plane. Obviously our carbon footprint is lower right now through COVID. You know, I think, I mean, I do still believe in printing books. I mean, we do a lot of digital books. Those are available now. I think we've become more dependent on that with COVID, but I personally, you know, can engage much more deeply with something if I'm reading a paper copy. So I wouldn't, you know, I think we do use recycled paper. I can't speak to how we fit in relation to publishers, but I do know that this is something that upper management has been thinking about a lot. And a lot of it has been focused on reducing the footprint through travel internationally, because we're a global, you know, we have offices in Cambridge and Manila, in Mexico and New York.
If I can add a bit to that,
yeah.
Ross, I can definitely send you the specifics, Ross. We have, as Sarah said, a really big push to become carbon neutral and sometime soon. And I can send you the specifics on that front. There's a whole range of initiatives across the press. But to be more specific, I would have to send you more information from the people that are in charge of those initiatives. So I would like to keep in touch and send you more information about that. It's okay.
That'd be excellent. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
The next question is from Camila Sandoval. How long does it take for the book to be published? And can you publish a book that is edited by 2 institutions?
So how long it takes depends a lot on how many revisions you have to do after the review. But I would say the review process is usually 2 to 4 months, and then the production process after review is usually 8 to 10 months. You know, so you know, add those up and then budget for however much time you think you need to revise after the reviews. And then the second part of the question, I think I'm just blanking out on what it was.
So it was, can you publish a book that is edited by 2 or more institutions? Yeah,
I'm not that familiar with a book being edited by an institution, but we certainly have edited volumes that are edited by 2 academics or even 3 or 4 academics. You know, I can't take forward many edited volumes. I can usually only take forward about 3 or 4 a year. So with those, I'm usually looking, you know, for a very clear theoretical contribution that's articulated, you know, in the intro and in the conclusion, and holds all the chapters together so that the chapters are making a clear intervention into the field.
Next question. How is what is the copyright and open access process in Cambridge books publications? So how does that process?
Yeah, I'm always fuzzy on some of the more sort of micro level details. We do have, if you Google Cambridge University Press open access policy, you can find that we have green open access and gold open access. So green open access is for all books, and that means, you know, you can post, you know, you can post the version of the typescript that you submitted to Cambridge before review and copy editing online. You know, usually you wouldn't, and I think you can publish, again, I'm not totally sure about the details, so it would be worth confirming this on our website. And if you can't find that, shoot me an email. I'll type my email into the chat right now, or after that. I'll do that later. Yeah, but that'll sort of lay out what you can do without any open access funding. Green open access or gold open access means that some institution or some funding body gives you about $14,000 US, and then we publish the book. We will still sell print copies, but we'll make the digital copy free for everyone to download. But you know, there needs to be funding for that.
If I might add a bit to that, there's also an area specifically in charge of open access. So if you have any further questions, we could put you in touch with them and get into the specifics again. So it's kind of, I'm sure Sarah agrees on this, it's kind of hard without having the details of the specific thing you want to know, but we can keep in touch and send more information your way as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna put my email into the chat right now. So please feel free to follow up with me by email if you want me to send you a link that lays out everything in more detail.
Okay, so the next question from Ricardo Villanueva. If I'm considering publishing some chapters of the thesis, how many would be okay if I then would like to transform my thesis into a book?
Yeah, I don't think there's any hard rule there, but you want to save something for the book, and what you want to save something that's theoretical for the book. So if the theoretical contribution is already available in article form, and then the book is just sort of more empirical detail that supports that, you know, I would be worried that there's not enough of an audience for the book. So, you know, in general, I would say it's normal to publish about 1 to 2 chapters in an article form. I do get a bit skeptical if it's, you know, often when I send projects for review and 4 to 5 chapters have been published, I get reviews back that say, you know, this just feels like a compilation of articles. It doesn't feel integrated as a book, the argument, you know, so I am a bit skeptical if there are 4 or 5 chapters published, or 4 or 5, maybe not exactly published verbatim, but that's not a hard and fast rule. It's just, is there a theoretical contribution in the book that is greater than the contribution in each of the individual articles? So, you know, we look at it in a holistic way. But you do want to be cautious. I mean, that can be a concern.
The next question also has to do with dissertations and thesis. So it's from Miriam Gomez. And so I completed my PhD in the UK a few years ago. I had been suggested to publish it. My question is, should I just send the manuscript? And the next sort of like a follow-up to that is, I'm puzzled as to if one should send the whole manuscript or just the abstract and 1 chapter or so. What would be better, basically?
It doesn't really matter that much. I mean, you need to also, you know, I mean, again, I'm getting 15 submissions a week, so I'm not going to be able to read the whole manuscript. So I do need to see a proposal that answers my, you know, my standard questions. And the 1-paragraph abstract, you know, if I'm interested in taking the project forward, I will probably ask to see the intro or the full manuscript. And usually if it's a first book, I will want to send it for review at the stage when the full manuscript is ready. But I wouldn't worry too much about how much material you include when you reach out to publishers initially. I just make sure, that you include that paragraph, that proposal, and then you say, the full manuscript is also available. I'd be happy to forward it, or you can just go ahead and attach it. I mean, and then just, you never want to send the publisher the dissertation itself, because, there may be some presses that publish dissertations, but, Cambridge doesn't. So we want to consider the book at the stage where it's very distinct from the dissertation.
Okay, so there's another question that says from Catherine Reyes. I was also wondering, sorry about the background noise. I also was wondering whether Sara recommends holding a book workshop before sending the manuscript to her.
Yeah, I think if you have resources to do a book workshop, that is terrific, because senior scholars will just pull out things that are really interesting in the manuscript and sort of give you confidence to pursue particular angles. So I think those really do help enrich the final book. A book workshop is not a prerequisite. I'm very concerned with equity. Many people cannot do the book workshop, so when I started, sometimes I'll talk to scholars, and again, I think this is often North American scholars, where they sort of assume like, oh, if I get a book workshop, the manuscript will then go to 2 people who are at that workshop, and that becomes an equity concern for me. So I might send the manuscript to someone who was one of the participants in the book workshop, but I probably wouldn't send it to both. I mean, I can't say in good faith that a book workshop is not helpful. It really is, and I definitely think everyone should do it if they can, but if you can't do it, please know that Cambridge does take steps to make sure that we're treating books in an equitable way, whatever the resources are at the author's institution. But workshops can really be fantastic. It's not like, I think sometimes like if you bring in people from different disciplines, you get, they can be really rich. I think they do often really help to develop a book. If you can't do a book workshop, again, I would try to engage with scholars who you think your work is in conversation with. Sometimes you can send them the manuscript and they might give you comments or give you comments on some chapters. So, often there are things you can do if a workshop is not possible. But if a workshop is possible, go for it. It's good.
Okay, so the next question is from Alfonso Donoso. It says some research topics in political science are interdisciplinary, so they could also be published under other disciplinary headings, such as history, economics, philosophy. Do you send these proposals to other editors in these other disciplines? I'm specifically thinking about on books on political theory that may well be published in political science and or philosophy.
Yeah, I would encourage you to submit to the editor who publishes in your home discipline, and then, but you do want to flag that there are multiple audiences. We love it when books have audiences across disciplines. So, that helps us think about positioning and marketing the book. I mean, I work across both political science and sociology, so, that gives me a great opportunity to promote books in both fields. But Cambridge as a press, we do want to make one decision. So, I would say if your PhD is in political science, I would say to start with the political science editor. She might share it with the philosophy editor. But usually a book will have a primary home, and then it's great if it has secondary homes. But like that really is a benefit. That's always something that makes me look favorably on a proposal. But it's good to sort of go to one editor to begin with for the primary home. It's a good question.
Right. So the next question, which I'm not really sure about the answer, is your press or publishing house interested in studies about Mexican languages? So First Nation languages, I'm assuming. I'm not sure about the answer to that one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't either. So I'll say it's not like there's a topic, that I'm only looking for specific topics and I know what they are. I often like books that surprise me. That would be outside. I mean, I don't know. It's not immediately obvious to me how that would be a political science book, but it might be. So I would sort of need to understand more what contributions that makes to political science. We do have a linguistics editor, and that linguistics editor could know. So I guess I think about sort of who the audience and the discipline is, whether the, if it's a field, right? Like I said before, we don't publish much on the sociology of sports, but in general, I can't really go by the topic. Like I need to sort of see more about what the theoretical contributions are to answer that. But we do have a linguistics editor who's very nice.
Right. So the next one is, are you interested in publishing books translated from Spanish, or have we published books translated from Spanish?
Yeah, we do that in some cases. It can be more messy and the market can be smaller. So, if you're writing on, it depends on what you're writing, but if you're writing on Latin America, probably most of your target audience will speak Spanish. I mean, maybe not, maybe you're writing on Latin America, but the book has legs to travel to other regions of the world. It's not something that we normally do because, and it can be very, very hard to get a translation that's a good quality. So it's sort of a more labor-intensive project for the press, and in a competitive context, it's not something that we will do often, but we will do it for books that we think are really, really important. Usually where the author is able to fund the translation. I don't have funds myself at Cambridge to fund the translation. But I would say so much of the answer to that depends on the specifics. So shoot me an email and we can talk about that.
So the next one is, I think you already spoke to this, but is there any problem if some parts of the manuscript were published in various journals? Of course, not a literal copy, but with adaptations to the manuscript.
No, that's not a problem. In some cases, the journal policy will say that you retain rights to use that. In some cases, you might need to secure permission. Usually you can. I think journals, it wouldn't create goodwill if journals said you couldn't use something in your own book. It can be more tricky if you want to take an article and publish it as a chapter in an edited volume. I think that's viewed, because that's sort of a compilation, that's viewed differently than an authored book. And then again, I would just sort of go back to the point that the book as a whole needs to make a theoretical argument that is appearing for the first time.
Okay, so there's a raised hand. Griselda, I'm going to unmute your microphone. It's taking a bit longer than usual.
Okay.
Please be patient. It seems like we might be having technical problems unmuting the microphone. So Griselda, if you want to write your question in the chat, I think that would be easier. Yeah, it seems like we're not able to unmute you. I'm not really sure why, but through the chat should be fine if you want to ask your question. And I think that's about it. I think that's every question we have.
Yeah, I see. Where can I find requirements to publish a book with you? There are no a lot of it's subjective, and it's about sort of whether I think the book is a good fit, but you want to submit the proposal and the manuscript to the publisher. And we sent some proposal guidelines. Sergio had attached those earlier. So, that'll sort of show you what to publish in a proposal guideline. I guess thinking just of very practical things, usually a book manuscript is somewhere between 70 to 100,000 words. So I might not be able to pursue something that's 150,000 words or 20,000 words. But let me know though if you sort of are, if there's something more specific in that you'd want me to speak to. If there's a specific requirement that you're wondering about. And then it looks like there's one question that's private.
I think there's no more questions.
So yeah, so it's good to meet you, and I hope some of you will submit to CUP, or that I'll meet you at a conference when hopefully we can all travel again. So thank you very much for coming to this.
Oh, and there's just a reminder about your email, Sarah. If you can
Yes.
write it in the chat, that someone asked for it. Yeah.
Do that right now.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for attending, and we hope you are able to submit to CUP. And thank you, Sarah, for the presentation.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.